Welcome into Respect Coin, presented by 𝗰𝐶𝗰𝗶𝗹 Chicago-Southland. Are you ready for your winning moment? Find it at 𝗰𝐶𝗰𝗶 Chicago-Southland, where the action never stops. Play the hottest table games, enjoy the newest slots, celebrate the biggest jackpots at 𝗰𝐶𝗰𝗶 Casino. There's a win for you waiting around every corner. It's March Madness time. Last week, we were here, we were talking about the conference tournaments. They were awesome, and I'm happy to be joined by Nate Jacobson, again, senior digital content producer at Stadium, my homie, my friend, best time of year, man. Tell me what just stuck out to you from this last week of basketball as we get into the tournament.
Yeah, it's good to be back. Thanks for having me. I think something that I was thinking about was the amount of injuries we saw in conference tournaments, so maybe not the most positive start to this, but it's definitely something to consider when you're looking at the NCAA tournament and maybe thinking about how you're going to handicap conference tournaments going forward and how teams might care more, or they should care more, about the NCAA tournament. And we saw a lot of players being held out. I know Texas Tech, a team that we talked up last week, we got some really bad injury news Friday night where Darian Williams, where I wasn't expected to be hurt, he missed that game, and Arizona took a lot of money. Of course, Cooper-Flagg getting hurt in the quarterfinals of the ACC tournament kind of changed everything in terms of the odds dynamic there. Duke obviously won the ACC, so it didn't really matter. But there's just things like that happened. Iowa State, I was on them pretty big against BYU, and both their guards are not playing. And I think 𝗵𝗵𝘃 will come back for the NCAA tournament, but Gilbert, it's weird how they kind of handled that situation. And then some of the team I follow, Mizzou, Mark Mitchell, their big guy, it looks like he'll be okay. So yeah, a lot of injuries. And then I guess the biggest one, that might be the most impactful of the first round, Memphis. If you were wondering why 5-seed Memphis is a 3-point underdog, or like 2.5-point underdog to a 12-seed Colorado State, Tyrese Hunter, their point guard, got hurt in the semifinals of that game on Saturday, missed Sunday's game. They win anyway, but now it's kind of a question how far could they go, because I think Memphis is a team that at their best, they could play with anyone in the country. I think some of the issues, they play down their competition, but they have the talent to hang with a lot of teams. And if he's out, then it could be trouble for the Tigers.
It makes their team completely different. And one of the things that stuck out to me when the brackets were released was Colorado State. Not a lot of people probably know how good they are for their league. I mean, the Mountain West has been strong for a while, but like, this is, the odds makers know. Like, you would be remiss if you think that they made a mistake by favoring Colorado State. Like, they're a very good team, and they might be catching Memphis at the right time. So let's jump in. The brackets are set. Selection Sunday was kind of weird without Greg Gumbel. I don't know if you had that feeling.
For sure, absolutely.
The first thing that I thought when we watched the end of the Big Ten championship game and they come back on and I don't see him in that seat. So they did a really nice job of making a tribute to Greg Gumbel.
Absolutely, yeah.
But the brackets are set. We have all of our first round matchups. So let's start with the first bets we made when the brackets were released. I'll start. This is a very interesting one for me because we obviously have some teams in Calcutta, and the team that I root for with my heart is playing against UC San Diego, which is a team that we have financial investment in. But the first bet I made as soon as it was available was took UC San Diego first half money line. Okay. I really feel like after the Michigan improbable run in the Big Ten championship, in the Big Ten tournament, you're traveling to Denver. UC San Diego is regionally much closer to that. They're going to be super fired up. It's their first game in the tournament, so you could expect some jitters, but Michigan, I think, is in a really vulnerable spot here. I think UC San Diego is very slept on. We know because we've been watching them, but in the end, I do think Michigan can still win the game. I do think they're going to get punched in the mouth early, and I wouldn't be surprised if they lost outright. But I do think that, if this team was coached by Juwan Howard still, I would take UC San Diego full out for the game. Sure. But I do think Dusty May is really good, and he'll have a game plan together for UC San Diego. So I think UC San Diego plays better in that first half, gives Michigan that wake-up call, like, hey, you're going to have to play top-notch basketball if you want to escape from this game. So that was the first bet I made.
Yeah, I mean, we don't talk about our picks, but the first bet I made was UC San Diego full game plus 3. Missed out on the 3.5. Maybe by the time you're listening, it gets there because it does feel a little bit short where, you're not getting a ton of value, I guess, at UC San Diego against a team that just won the Big Ten tournament. But
Yep.
UC San Diego, a team that I was going to bet on pretty much regardless in the first round. Top 40 team. 𝗵𝗏 𝗏𝗀 is a player that a lot of people are going to
Stud.
get to know this week,
Yep.
hopefully Thursday night. And as you mentioned, really not an ideal spot for Michigan. They just played 3 games in 3 days. They played until Sunday. Now they go to Denver. The game's at 10 p.m. Eastern time, so
Lot
late
of waiting,
game on their
lot
body
of
clock.
watching.
An advantage for San Diego, UC San Diego. That
Yep.
It's a 7 p.m. Pacific time start. That could even start later, depending on like how late some of those other games
Yeah.
go. So I think it's just a disaster situation for Michigan. Great for them winning the Big Ten. I know we talked about last week how not there was like value on Michigan, but it was kind of crazy that they were like the 7th favorite to win the Big Ten.
Right,
All
as
they
the
needed,
4th seed.
yeah, with having the double bye.
Yep.
So yeah.
Well, because they backed into that double bye.
Oh, yeah,
they
no,
played
for
so
sure.
bad down the stretch that like everyone was kind of down on them.
And
So it's not surprising.
They lost those 3 games in the last 3 games of the regular season. But even before that, for Michigan, they basically went 2 months without beating a team by 4 points or more.
Right.
All their wins were close. I think they had a negative point differential in conference play. So, I mean, I could see a scenario here where Michigan wins by 1 to 3 points.
Right. You still cover your bet though
and-
if you take the spread.
Right. So UC San Diego, that was a pretty, I wouldn't say an easy bet because I probably would have liked a little more in the number. But I mean, just based on how I was approaching Selection Sunday, where like my first bet was likely going to be on UC San Diego in some form. And then you get a Michigan team that just won the Big Ten tournament. We saw Iowa 3 years ago losing the first round after winning the Big Ten tournament, having to play on a Thursday. We saw Purdue lose to Fairleigh Dickinson after winning the Big Ten tournament 2 years ago. So
It's kind of like a kiss of death almost.
yeah, and definitely interested, or I bet UC San Diego. So going with the Tritons on Thursday. That was the first bet I made, first of 2.
What's the other bet you placed?
So I placed VCU +3 against BYU. I'm just not really a big believer in BYU. I think it's too much living with the 3, dying with the 3. I do think VCU is a really good team. If you look at some of the point spreads of VCU games in the A10, which is a pretty solid league, it's not the best, but there's some like a decent second tier of teams, whether it's Dayton or George Mason, who they beat yesterday, but like they were always like a pretty big favorite. So they're a highly regarded team. They're well coached. I just don't think much separates these two teams. So I grabbed the +3. If you do want to find a negative and maybe why the line is where it is at 3.5. The game is in Denver, so probably advantage for BYU playing at elevation. They last played on Friday, so they have 2 extra days of rest. VCU had to play Sunday in the A10 tournament.
Right.
But I just BYU's a sell team for me. Just kind of been looking to pick spots and really overachieve this year with a new coach after Mark Pope left for Kentucky and a kind of a completely new a pretty new roster. So they've had a great season, but I do think VCU is a really tough 11 seed and is going to win outright.
Hey, I don't hate it. I think this is one of the matchups they talked about on the Selection Sunday show that really sticks out. It's almost like a contrast in styles. If BYU doesn't shoot well, they could get run out of the gym. If they do shoot well, they could run VCU out of the gym. There's a lot of variance there, but I don't hate the logic. My thing is like I've watched more BYU this year than I want to even admit somehow. Like they just somehow are always on. They're on late. But they did show me something in the tournament games where it's like if they do catch fire, it's going to be hard to beat them. So maybe VCU wins that first game, but I think if BYU can get past VCU, I think they're probably primed for an Elite 8 run. Like if they get hot, it's going to be really hard to beat them. Like would you be surprised if BYU if BYU wins and then they take on Wisconsin? Like they could beat Wisconsin in any floor in the country. And then it's like, do you trust BYU more than you trust Alabama? Like,
right.
I don't know. So that game is going to be really, really, really important, obviously. And I don't see a scenario where like VCU gets blown out. I think they're too good to not make it a game. And maybe you do like them better in a close game, right? Like a track meet, BYU's probably going to win. They scored almost 100 points in the quarterfinals of the tournament, right?
Like State, yeah.
Yeah, so like they have the firepower for it, but if they go cold, like VCU's got a really good shot of winning outright. So I don't hate the pick at all, for sure. All right, so let's move on. We're talking about the tournament. Like we said, the brackets are set. There's 4 number 1 seeds. The number 1 overall seed, Auburn, I think well deserved. They had incredible resume this year. not playing their best basketball right now, but Bruce Pearl, been around, understands. We got Duke, we'll monitor Cooper Flagg. We have no idea how good or bad he's doing with the ankle. It's kind of random. And one of the things I've been talking about with like my buddies is like it's so easy to re-injure a sprained ankle. So you got to be on the lookout for that. Florida, probably the most impressive team that we saw over conference tournament week. Like they looked pretty dominant from start to finish. And then finally, Houston, again, another number 1 seed for them. So of those 4 teams, which 1 seed do you think has the hardest path to the Final Four?
Yeah, I think it's Houston. I think it just all comes down to that potential, very likely, I feel like, second-round game against Gonzaga. Gonzaga's a top 10 KenPom team. I feel like Houston-Gonzaga should be a Sweet 16 game, just based on what the talent level of both teams are. And so I think that the fact that Houston has to get a very underseeded Gonzaga team in the second round is probably what makes the hardest path for me. If they get by that, then they'll have a great opportunity in the Sweet 16 against Purdue, who I'm not too high on, and then Clemson, who I do like, but during conference tournament week and going back to another injury, it was in the second round or a quarterfinal game against Stanford. Or not SMU, Dylan Harper, one of their guards, very good defender. He broke his hand, and maybe they could afford to still advance, beat McNeese State, which will be also a tricky game.
Right.
So
Will Wade.
Yeah. So like we'll talk a little bit more about that and potential upsets, but yeah, I think it's a weird situation where like Houston's second round game is going to be a lot more challenging than potentially a Sweet 16 game, but because that second round game is going to be so tough, and they're playing a legit like top 15 team, probably top 20 team at worst. That's why I have Houston as the team with the toughest path to make the Final Four out of the ones.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have much beef with that pick. Honestly, like this might sound crazy, but I feel like being the number 1 overall seed and having the resume that they had, like drawing Michigan State as your 2 seed for Auburn is kind of tough. I mean, like obviously there's not a ton of landmines in this part of the bracket. We're looking at the top left in the South, but Iowa State, if they were at full strength in that spot, that's a nightmare you could potentially run into. Michigan State, obviously they didn't win the Big Ten tournament, but that's probably a good thing at this point, right? Like they didn't have anything else to prove. They're still a 2. So if you get Auburn advancing Sweet 16, Elite 8, if they don't get tripped up from there, they're going to have dogfights to get to the Final Four. So I was a little surprised. I thought Auburn, because of their resume, they might have been a little, maybe the metrics, the advanced metrics say this is a little more favorable, but like looking at it with pen and paper, like you're going to have to go through Tom Izzo in March. That's a tall task. So hopefully, I mean, if you're an Auburn fan, you might feel good. I don't know. I'm looking at it and I'm like, this could be potentially dangerous for the number 1 overall seed.
Yeah, and I actually was kind of debating between Duke and Auburn as having the easiest path, but looking more into it, the good news for Auburn, if you're an Auburn fan, your games will be in Lexington in the first weekend, so an arena you're familiar with. They won last month in Lexington pretty handily. And then Atlanta. And Atlanta is
game,
very close to Auburn. I went to Auburn once, flew into Atlanta.
There you go.
And then took a rental car to Auburn. The problem is, if you just go back to the game in Lexington, you might be playing Louisville in Lexington,
which is a home game
on Saturday. I believe it'd be Saturday. So yeah, that's not a very it's not favorable at all. That's a huge landmine, even though depending what you think of Louisville, but it's going to be almost a semi-road game. I mean, I'm sure it's going to be a split crowd because Auburn fans will travel to that game, but so will Louisville fans. They're
coming from closer.
And they're going to want to make a lot of noise, especially in Rupp Arena. And
for sure.
I think there's like the extra motivation of having a chance to win, make the second weekend in your biggest rival's building. Like that, there's going to be a little of extra incentive there's plenty of incentive already, but that's definitely like a little bit of a tricky game, and that's why Auburn, I buy the fact that the path is hard because of that second round game, and then getting Michigan State and Iowa State. I know Iowa State's shorthanded, but Auburn and Iowa State played a classic game way back at the Maui Invitational quarterfinal, where Auburn had to have a huge rally to beat Iowa State. So yeah, there's some tricky games potentially there for the Tigers.
For sure. And I think we probably both agree then Duke has the easiest path. I think we said it
We said it before at the committee. And I wrote on Twitter, the annual reminder, the NCAA Tournament's a TV show, and a lot of people liked that tweet. And I mean, you start off in Raleigh. You could have gotten Gonzaga or UConn as an 8 seed, but they're in other places. So instead, it's Mississippi State or Baylor, who I don't think too highly of either team.
Nope.
I really think 𝗂𝗏 could sit until the Elite Eight, and they would be able to make it to that point, especially seeing what they were able to do without Flag in the first half against UNC and then Saturday against Louisville. And then you just look at the bottom. Alabama, a very volatile 2 seed.
Yep.
They can beat anyone any day. They can also shoot themselves out of a tournament in a game before playing Duke. Wisconsin just played 4 games in 4 days, and now they have to travel to Denver. So maybe
brutal.
Maybe Duke would avoid both those teams in the Elite Eight if they got there. So yeah, I think it really sets up well for Duke to make the Final Four. I know that Duke contacted the NCAA Tournament Committee, letting them know 𝗂𝗏 was going to play or be available at least. So I'm sure that probably made sure that Duke was going to have a favorable path here. And the travel is very, very generous. Raleigh, obviously, right in that area, and then Newark. Whenever Duke plays in New York City at MSG, they always have a ton of fans there.
So they'll be represented well. Like we said, the tournament is a TV show. We'll talk a little bit about North Carolina later, but you kind of see the writing on the wall, right? Like if Duke gets 𝗂𝗏 back for, let's call it the second round game, because they're trying to avoid any doubt. This is a situation where they could play him for 28 minutes and win.
Yep.
Handily.
For sure.
So you don't put anything in pen, nothing in Sharpie. I know a lot of people like saying Sharpie. Anything could happen in this tournament.
Yeah.
But Duke, to me, does feel like they have the easiest path. And like we said last week, the tournament is better, revenue is higher if Duke goes far. So don't be surprised if you see them in the Elite Eight with a chance to get back to the Final Four. All right, let's move on. We have the bracket of death. We've talked a little bit about these paths. I think it's the Midwest. I don't know how you feel about it. You said Houston has a tough path. I think the Midwest is a gauntlet, and I think for a few reasons. Houston having to play Gonzaga, we mentioned that. Illinois is a 6 seed, and I think that they probably were disrespected a little bit. Their resume was really strong. They're really well coached. This is, I don't know, maybe their 5th straight tournament. They would have been in the COVID year, so it would have been 6 years. Brad Underwood's really great. They have a lot of talent, but the difference with Illinois this year is they're not old, they're young. They have a bunch of young guys, so it's a different kind of dynamic. You win that game against either Texas or Xavier, which is going to be a tough game no matter who wins. Both of those teams are pretty talented. And then you could end up playing against Kentucky, which Kentucky has like a lot of reasons to want to overachieve. Mark Pope's first year, prove that they can do it without Calipari. Illinois will have the benefit of being in Milwaukee. It's a short drive, 90 minutes. They will be very well represented. But I think that this bottom right of this bracket is miserable, especially if you're one of those better teams. Like, I'm looking at UCLA. UCLA's probably happy to be in, and Utah State could just punch them in the mouth. Who knows? Like, it's just like a lot of really good teams bunched up. You've got Purdue, you've got Clemson, McNeese. There's a lot of good teams there. Tennessee is the 2. So I don't know if you feel the same, but I think the Midwest region is probably the toughest one to come out of it. And I think whoever does come out of it is probably going to be in pretty good shape in that Final Four game.
Yeah, I see your point, especially if those teams play up to their potential. But there's also like a chance that some of those teams could have a struggle. Like Tennessee, I mean, sometimes you worry about if they could score enough in a tight game. Mentioned my concerns of Clemson with Harper injured, Dylan Harper, that is. Purdue, just not for me this year. I'll get to Illinois a little more. I think the toughest region for me is Florida, is the West, led by Florida, is the 4th number 1 seed, but maybe the team playing the best right now, just won the SC tournament pretty handily. The 2 seed is St. John's, which I think might be the weakest 2 seed, but they do one thing really well, and it's defense. So you're not going to want to play St. John's and Pitino, especially if they progress to the tournament and
they
build
kept
confidence.
them far away from the East Coast, though.
Is it? Yeah,
it's the San Francisco regional.
Well, which is another reason I think that's kind of difficult for some of these teams, or a lot of East Coast schools in here.
For sure.
Texas Tech, I think they're a top 8 team when they're fully healthy, so they're probably the best of the 3 seeds.
Yep.
I think Maryland could be the best 4 seed out of the ones there, just based on their starting 5 that they have. Yeah, and they had to play. They didn't have to play till Sunday, which could end up being a blessing to the size. Although they're getting sent out to Seattle to play Grand Canyon, and it's an awkward game.
Bryce Drew.
If they get by it, then good for them. They'll probably have a good path to the Sweet 16. And then, I mean, I don't know what your opinion is on UConn. I was very unimpressed with them Friday against Creighton.
Same.
But they're still the 8 seed. I don't know. Maybe it's just like because the name UConn, you're scared of them. But I guess UConn just being an 8 seed just kind of makes this like more of a tougher
sure.
regions and something else. And then, I mean, looking towards like the St. John's pod, which I believe that's in Providence, they're going to play the winner of Kansas against Arkansas. So it's going to be either Bill Self or John Calipari against Rick Pitino in the second round, which kind of circles back to the whole TV show.
They bunched them up.
Especially if it's Arkansas, like Pitino Cal from the, they had some meetings back in the day when they were in the great state of Kentucky.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think for me that's the toughest bracket because you have a St. John's team that's elite defensively. You have a Texas Tech team that probably should be a 2 seed. You have a Maryland team that could, take out a lot of teams
just
in the country.
Anyone. Yeah.
So that for me, it's a very fun bracket. And I guess you want to even go deeper. Drake's in that, and they're going to play a 60-possession game against Mizzou, and Mizzou is going to have their hands full preparing for that this week.
Definitely.
With a Thursday game in Wichita on Thursday evening.
The brackets kind of went at us a little bit, the teams that we root for. I know we talked a little bit about Drake, and you mentioned last week, like, I'm going to bet on Drake, and now they're playing your alma mater, and you're like, uh-oh. What do we do? So are you taking Drake or are you taking Mizzou?
I mean, take Drake plus the 6.5.
Hell yeah, take all the points.
In a game where if Drake could control the pace, it's going to be a low possession game. Every offensive possession from Mizzou is going to count. They're also sometimes a streaky team offensively.
Yep.
So yeah, I mean Drake plus the points it's not something I personally bet yet, but it would be the only way to look where possessions are going to be at a premium and. Mizzou winning by 1 to 6 points actually feels like a very likely thing that could happen in that game.
It's going to be a tight one for sure. And I know that like Dennis Gates, head coach of Mizzou, he's not going to – this is not like we're looking over Drake. There's a bunch of ties in that game, like local flavor involved. So these are guys that may have played each other in high school and grade school. Like there's a lot of pride on the line in that game.
Yeah, so McCollum from Northwest Missouri State took 4 of his players. So a lot of players who – played college in the state of Missouri, and I know that a lot of players have ties to Kansas City, which makes it unique because the games that game will be in Wichita. So definitely kind of fun dynamics there. And if Drake loses, I wouldn't be surprised if Ben McCollum's named the Iowa coach on Friday.
Yeah, I mean like right away, as soon as it
makes
happens.
too much sense.
All right, so we've talked brackets, we've talked paths. Let's talk upsets. That's why people come. That's why people love the tournament. There's a lot of dynamite and landmines involved in this bracket. So, upsets that stick out to you, give me your first one.
So, just outright or like against the spread? Or
I think
or
either
just
way.
Underdogs have a chance?
Yeah.
So, I'm not going to predict this as an outright upset, but I mentioned a little earlier, brutal spot for Wisconsin, playing early in Denver on Thursday after playing 4 games in 4 days. Now they have to go to altitude, and they're playing Montana, who is a school in the Mountain Time Zone. So that's a little bit of a tricky spot. Yale over Texas A&M. Just Texas A&M sometimes can struggle scoring, and Yale
they're so reliant on Wade Taylor.
Right.
And he can get you a bucket at any time, but if he's not making shots, they're very vulnerable.
Yeah, the rest of the team can't make threes, and Yale, they beat Auburn last year, so they won't be afraid of that moment.
Yep.
Something that I'm actually considering betting plus the points, and I could see outright, and this might be a little crazy, but Akron over Arizona. We know Tommy Lloyd has not had the best NCAA tournament experience.
Not at all.
Head coach of Arizona. Caleb Love, who had some good moments in the Big 12 tournament, he's a player that could easily go 1-9 and shoot his team out of the game.
Yep.
Akron, coached by John Gross, they won the MAC. I think that Akron is definitely a team that's, I don't know if they're alive to win, but I do think that they could keep that game close. McNeese State over Clemson. Will Wade against his alma mater. I mentioned Clemson lost Dylan Harper. High Point, because I'm not a big believer in Purdue.
Same.
Troy over Kentucky, because I'm not, another injury that happened there's so many conference tournament injuries, but Lamont Butler, who we kind of liked, we liked Kentucky last week.
Yeah.
If they're fully healthy. They lost Jackson Robinson a few weeks ago, but with Butler back and he's a guy who made the national title game at San Diego State, but
Yep.
Butler got hurt against Oklahoma, missed the Alabama game, and Kentucky kind of got smoked. If he's not 100%, and he's been hurt multiple times this year, so I wouldn't count on him being fully healthy, and they have to play Troy, and think about Kentucky, all the pressure that's on Mark Pope and losing to Oakland last year in the tournament. I know it's like a lot of new players and coaching staff, but the fan base is going to have a lot of pressure on them. So if they start missing shots, things can get tight for Kentucky. So yeah, I think there's a handful of live teams on Thursday and Friday.
Yeah, we mentioned UC San Diego a little bit over at the top, but one that really sticks out to me that I think is pretty interesting, and I don't know that like the spread really tells you whether or not this is like going to be an upset, but I mean, like, would you call Arkansas beating Kansas an upset? Like, Kansas is not. They're not as good as they've been traditionally.
So I actually put that on the list. I also put Oklahoma over UConn, even though the seeding isn't that big of a disparity. Like 4.5 points, like that's enough to like at least mention.
For sure.
Or like that's, you know, if you do like that team against the spread, you probably think they can win outright. And I do like Arkansas there. I'm not exactly sure their injury situation.
Yeah, they got to get some
Boogie
guys
Flam
back.
might come back, which I'm not sure what to make of that. He's their kind of their star freshman, but they were playing well even without a couple guys. And I know it's not a deep team, but in like a one-game kind of situation, and in Kansas away from home, not very impressive this year. So yeah, I have Arkansas written down as a potential look, depending on like what the injury situation and where the line moves because of that.
I want to talk a little bit more about Wisconsin and Montana because I know that was the first one you mentioned.
Yeah.
For anyone who was not watching the Big Ten championship game, like that was the epitome of like Big Ten football, like 1930s Big Ten football. I mean, like no one made shots in the first half. I think it was 23-21, or something like that in the first half. It picked up a little in the second half, but you could visibly tell. Like I could tell by watching, like Tanji had no legs.
Yep.
All the shots that they were shooting from, I mean, they shot, if they would have just went inside Wisconsin, they would have probably won the game by 8 or 10 points. They just kept jacking threes. And what you do when you're tired is you're settling for jump shots and hoping that they go in. This is another situation similar to how I feel about Michigan. Like Montana is going to be fired up, happy to be there, playing free, nothing to lose. If they start knocking down shots, you could very easily see those guys at Wisconsin. Their eyes get big. They look at the scoreboard, they're down 7, they're down 8, that feels like 15. Now you're forcing shots. So I think Wisconsin might be one of the more upset alert teams in that first round, and they didn't get any favors from the committee at all. I mean, they're a 3 seed, they're traveling to the other side of the country. They already had, issues scoring, I would say, unless Tanji is like going off. So I don't know. Wisconsin could be one that, right off the bat, could be a kind of tough look. And, we'll go back, I'll go down to the bottom. You mentioned Purdue. I don't know much about High Point, but I do know a lot about Purdue, and Braden Smith has to put that team on his back, and he can. He's one of those guards that is good enough to really like catapult a team, but if he's not playing well, I see High Point potentially winning that game as a 13 seed. Now it's like everyone talks about the 4-13 matchup more than the 5-12.
Right.
I don't know why that is. I felt like the committee or the host of the show last night just kept hammering 4-13. So maybe it's like a propaganda play, but yeah, Purdue could be on upset alert for sure in that first round.
Yeah, I just looked in. So Wisconsin, I was watching their game against UCLA, and they couldn't miss from 3. They made 19 threes, over 50% yesterday, 7 of 39. So as you said, the legs were gone, and now they have to play. The game's at 11:30 a.m. Mountain Time on Thursday. So you get back to Indy or get back to Madison after playing 4 games in 4 days. Quick practice, try travel out there maybe Tuesday or Wednesday. It just doesn't seem like a very advantageous spot. I feel like I don't know much about Montana, but plus 16.5, maybe something first half, maybe like a race to 15 kind of deal, especially early. I'm guessing there'll be a decent amount of Montana fans in Denver.
I imagine.
Sure, it might be one of the big.
Travel well, Grizz. Travel well.
So yeah, I feel like having Montana in some way will be something I have. I just have to figure out the best way to play it.
For sure. All right. Let's talk about the first 4. That is our first action we're going to see Tuesday, Wednesday in Dayton. I kind of love that they do it this way, just more basketball. I don't know that it's necessarily necessary, but we're going to have some really interesting matchups. So let's look at the bracket really quickly. We have Alabama State and St. Francis, 2 16 seeds. We have San Diego State and North Carolina. We'll get to that in a second. American versus Mount St. Mary's. And then finally, Texas and Xavier. I have one question for you, and I'm going to lay out how in the hell did North Carolina get into this tournament?
Well, the chairman of the committee, 𝗶𝗶 𝗏𝗀𝗀, happens to be the athletic director of North Carolina. And apparently, if North Carolina makes the tournament, which I don't know why that incentive is in the contract at a school like North Carolina, but he gets like a $100,000 bonus. But he did leave the room, apparently.
That's what we've heard.
He left the room when they
times.
talked about North Carolina. But yeah, I was a little. I mean, I don't know if I was totally surprised to see it because what the committee does never really shocks me anymore.
Right.
But it was really. I didn't think it'd be at the expense of like Indiana.
Yeah.
And West Virginia, who I know you could definitely poke holes in West Virginia, and they actually said that the Tucker DeVries injury was the reason why they didn't make the tournament. Which, I mean, they were playing without him for like 3 months. So it wasn't like a new injury.
Right,
They were
that didn't
acclimated
happen this
without
weekend.
him. Yeah. So, yeah, I don't know. I thought when North Carolina was, losing by 24 to Duke on Friday night without Cooper Flagg, that was going to be the end of them. They had the valiant comeback and had a real chance to win if it wasn't for the lane violation on the free throw. But I guess that valiant comeback and just, it turned out to be a moral victory. And I'm sure the other people in the room didn't want to upset 𝗶𝗶.
Yeah, honestly, like that. This is the part of the TV show aspect that like gets kind of annoying. I do think like Tucker DeVries not being available, it reeks of like the Jordan Travis thing in football, where like it's kind of the same discussion. So I think it's kind of flawed. My thing about the committee is the chair of the committee should be someone completely independent. Maybe someone that doesn't even do anything in athletics. To just like, you can absorb all the information, you can digest all the numbers, and then you could be like the objective party that can make a decision here. Because what they explained on the selection show was UAB versus Memphis. If UAB wins, that would have kept North Carolina out.
Right.
But like, what if North Texas would have won the game before? So it felt like it was kind of a foregone conclusion that North Carolina was getting in. I have a bunch of friends that went to Indiana. They're clearly pissed. But the argument against Indiana is like they played good enough. They had good quad one wins. So they probably deserve to be in over North Carolina. 1-10 in the quad one. Like if the net doesn't matter that much, then why do we even have it? So it's kind of tough. But I don't know how you feel about it because I know we're going to talk about these games and make a little first four parlay. I think now that this all has happened, Hubert Davis has an opportunity to be like, no one believes in us.
Yeah. No,
so I don't know.
And I'm not huge on San Diego State this year. So yeah, I mean, like I don't necessarily like loving the idea of laying 4 with North Carolina, but I agree with you that North Carolina could use this as like a everyone against us moment.
Yeah. So let's pick some winners. We're not going to do spreads because I think the first 4 is so random
Totals.
Anyway. We can do anything we want. We're just going to do one pick from each game. So I did a little digging on Alabama State and St. Francis. I like Alabama State in the game. I don't know that that's any way to like handicap it. We definitely didn't watch these teams very much. I'm not going to sit here and pretend I have sharp information. But I do think those teams in the SWAC are a lot of fun to watch in these games. They're always super fired up. I can remember like the Texas Southerns of the world, like really playing extremely hard. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that Alabama State-St. Francis game, but my lean early was to take Alabama State.
Well, in my 2-minute handicap of this game, I was thinking maybe the under at 140. Just maybe even first half under. Just the thought of 2 teams that are now kind of in the spotlight of college basketball after playing most of their games on ESPN Plus or another streaming
at
service.
Random times during the day.
Exactly. So maybe there's a little bit of nerves early on, and I always kind of like looking in basketball games in these kind of high-stakes games, whether it's college basketball or even like NBA with Game 7 playoffs going under because possessions are longer. Maybe the refs aren't going to blow their whistle as much because they want the play to be decided on the court. So I think under. is the way I would look at this. The worry about under, though, in college basketball is you might get a foul fest late in the game.
And
so
then it's
maybe
all
if
free
you
throws.
cut it to first half under and not have to worry about the shenanigans at the end, that could be one way to play
I'm
that
good
game.
with the first half under. That sounds good to me. I mean, like I said, I don't have any real takes on these teams. So I do like the logic, though. I feel like that first game of the tournament, there is nerves, there is jitters. Both of those teams know that they're being watched more now than ever. Like, they may never get watched again if they don't ever get back. So I'm good with that first half under. Next game, San Diego State, North Carolina. We touched on North Carolina a little bit. I think North Carolina is going to win for reasons why I mentioned. They're going to play this us against the world mentality. I don't think San Diego State is as good as they've been traditionally. They do have some issues with turnovers, and you got guys on North Carolina that have played in 6 tournaments. Like, RJ Davis has been there forever. Like, he was there with Bacot. I'm surprised Bacot's not even on the team anymore. He was there for 10 years. He ran out of eligibility. So, I don't know. I like North Carolina. If you have any strong takes against that,
no, I do like that idea of North Carolina. Not sure if I want to lay the 4, but for the parlay, North Carolina money line, because we've seen North Carolina in spurts play really well. The second half against Duke, where they just kind of chipped away. Maybe it wasn't a fully engaged Duke without flag, but the game in Chapel Hill a week and a half ago, North Carolina was a tie game, I think, with 8 minutes left.
Yep.
So, yeah, they definitely have the ability. It's just they haven't been able to actually get wins over those teams. But San Diego State, I'm not super high on.
For sure. All right, American and Mount St. Mary's. What do you got? 2-minute handicap. What'd you dig up?
First half under.
There we go. I'm in. Let's do it.
It's an even lower total, 129.5. Spread of 2.5 for American on Wednesday. Let's fire up the first half under, unless you have
I don't.
A little bit more on these two teams.
This was one that I looked at and I was like, this maybe is like, we don't even need to watch it. Honestly, I'm going to watch it because it's on, but don't know very much about American outside of the fact that I read that they're old, like they're an older team. They have some experience, not obviously like tournament experience, but if you got a team that's old, that's been through the Patriot League, like whatever they've done over the last few years, like they're cohesive, so maybe that could help them. But I'm in on the under for the first half. And then we wrap up the first 4 with Texas and Xavier. We were big Texas people not long ago.
2 years ago.
2 years ago. I did really like that team. I do like their head coach. I'm not a big fan of Xavier, so I don't want to let my bias get involved, so I'll let you take it from here.
Yeah, I kind of wish these two teams were playing the other 11 seeds, because I think I would like to bet Xavier and Texas more than North Carolina, San Diego State.
Yep.
I'm going to go with Xavier just because of the potential hidden home court advantage. This game, being played down the road in Dayton, and Xavier's from Cincinnati. And Texas, they just played 3 games, 3 days of the NCAA Tournament. Really had a scratch and claw, especially that double overtime game against A&M. So just not really sure exactly how much they have left in the tank. And I think Xavier's probably feeling pretty fortunate that they got into the field after that collapse in the second half against Marquette. I do think they're going to want to take advantage of that. So Xavier, it's a loose kind of endorsement for Xavier at -2.5 or the money line. But yeah, the X-Men are the way I would go.
All right, let's paper, scissors, rock. I'm on Texas, you're on Xavier. On shoot, ready?
Rock, paper, scissors.
Oh my God. All right,
Okay.
we're going with Texas.
Hook 'em,
the
I
only
guess.
reason why I like Texas is because they have a legitimate pro.
Yep.
Like they might
Trey
have.
Johnson is amazing.
He's a really good player, and as long as he doesn't get in foul trouble, I think they'll stay in the game. I don't know that I need to bet them outright. I'll take the points if we can get them. So we'll go with Texas on that. So we have first half under in Alabama State and St. Francis. We've got North Carolina money line. We have first half under in American and Mount St. Mary's. We're taking Texas and the points for our 4-leg first 4 parlay. All right. We've talked a lot. I need you to give me one team to make the Sweet 16, your favorite to make the Final Four, and let's crown a champion, and let's get out of here. So what do you think?
So it's a team we haven't talked about, at least in this episode. We talked about them quite a bit last week. Oregon to make the Sweet 16 +225. Their first game is against Liberty. I like them in that game because the game is in Seattle, so a very favorable draw in terms of geography for Dana Altman's team. Dana Altman, a guy we love. And they're in the pod where the 4 seed is Arizona, who I mentioned could be vulnerable against Akron. And if it was Oregon, Arizona, former Pac-12 matchup in Seattle,
that's fun.
I would like Dana Altman over Tommy Lloyd. So plus 225. Shop around, though. I only checked one book that had all the Sweet 16, Elite 8, Final Four markets available. But yeah, check out Oregon and shop them around. And in Dana, we trust.
In Dana, we trust. Yeah, look, I like the Ducks. I've always been a fan of Dana Altman. I think he really elevates his team when it comes to playing in these kind of win-or-go-home national title or national tournament scenarios. So I definitely see them being a team that will factor in at that stage. Listen, I know we have a lot of financial investment in Texas Tech. I do think, like you mentioned earlier, they're the best 3 seed in my opinion. It's not the best value, minus 145 to get to the Sweet 16. I was kind of surprised. I thought it would be a little lower than that.
Yeah.
So I think that that's a team that I want to pencil in for the Sweet 16. If you can bet, those in your market, it's minus 145 right here on DraftKings. I haven't seen what it is on FanDuel. I wonder if there's a reason to line shop for that. But listen, Texas Tech has a couple pros. I think one, obviously, in JT Toppin. He's really good. And I think that the injury does scare a little bit. They're not going to be at 100% full strength. But, so I'm looking at FanDuel, minus 174. So if you're line shopping, take it on DraftKings. But I think this is another team to me where, we know them because we've been invested in them since conference play started. But I think a lot of people are going to be like, oh, Texas Tech is for real. After that first game, if they win handily, they're going to be favored in both of those games, and I see them making the Sweet 16.
Yeah, I saw Elite 8 plus 170, which is something that interested me. But if I can only lay minus 145 for Sweet 16, because if it's Texas Tech Mizzou, Texas Tech will be at least minus 200 in that game.
Yeah.
And I don't think they're going to have any issues with UNC Wilmington, as long as Texas Tech's 100%, which is why I'd be a little bit more concerned about trusting them for the Elite 8. But just to win 2 games, I do think minus 145 is a great price on the Red Raiders.
For sure. All right, so we got Sweet 16, Final Four. Who do you have in your Final Four?
So in the Midwest region, I think that's where you can kind of take some shots. I was debating Gonzaga. I actually do think Gonzaga, the Elite 8, could be a decent look. But I'm going to go 10-1 to make the Final Four. Illinois, the 6th seed. The path would be playing games in Milwaukee, in Indianapolis. Don't love Kentucky for the NCAA tournament because of the Lamont Butler injury. Even if he's fine, not going to be 100%.
Right.
Honestly, the Illinois game that doesn't concern me the most, but I would be concerned if it was like Texas Xavier coming in hot, playing Friday night. But that's the kind of the upside with Illinois, the swings with Illinois, where they have a high upside. But the reason they're 10-1 is because they do have a pretty low floor, and we've seen some not the best performances, including Friday night against Maryland, where they lost by, I believe it was 32.
Yep.
But if they can get by the first weekend, you would get likely, or if the chalk holds, Tennessee, a team that they lost by a point to or a bucket to in non-conference play in Champaign. And then we'll see what happens at the top of that bracket by the time we get there, where I kind of like Gonzaga potentially to beat Houston. So for me, Final Four in terms of value is Illinois at 10-1 or as a big swing, just because I think Texas Tech Final Four is definitely possible, and because I think Florida could at this point be overvalued. That could be a good look, but it's hard for me to see Duke not winning the East region, and then I don't really want to go against Auburn at least before the tournament. Maybe once we get to the second weekend, there could be an opportunity just to bet that individual game.
Even money,
but I don't want to go against Auburn at least yet.
Right. Yeah, listen, I agree. I think Illinois is really live to make a run. If they can get past Kentucky in that second round game, not to overlook either Texas or Xavier. I think both of those teams, like we mentioned, are very solid. But if they can get through to the Sweet 16, then it kind of sets up a little nicer for them. I think the fact that they're young makes it interesting. Like, young teams, I feel like, come out really excited. There might be some nerves. But if you can win 2 games and then you have some time to rest and game plan, I think Brad Underwood is one of the better coaches in the country who probably doesn't get talked about enough. He has a lot of pride in what he's doing at Illinois. I listened to him on the radio this morning. Nice that we're in the Chicago market, but he's like, one of the things he said that stuck out was like, this should be the standard at Illinois. So it's something that he really takes pride in, and I know that Illinois will travel well to Milwaukee, so they will not be, playing in a vacuum, right? Like they're going to have some support.
Yeah.
It's only 90 minutes from Chicago, so I do like that play. For me, I was looking at the South region, and as much as it pains me to say it, we're definitely talking Big Ten bias here. I'm not a Michigan State fan, but I do think if it was like gun to my head, Auburn versus Michigan State, I would take Izzo and Michigan State. They're plus 460 to make the Final Four. I think of all the teams that have been in that kind of elite category this year, Michigan State's path, outside of having to potentially take on the number 1 overall seed, is quite favorable, I would say. I think that Tom Izzo, obviously, they basically named the month after him, and they have suffered defeats that he's been at the helm of, right? We talk Middle Tennessee State. We've talked about these upsets over the years. He's going to have these guys ready, and they had the benefit of not having to play through Sunday, right? So they're rested. I think they're healthy. They have good game plan. They will play a lot of defense, and that travels. So at plus 460 is not the greatest value, but they are a 2 seed, probably one of the better 2 seeds. So I think Michigan State to make the Final Four. That's all bias aside from a Michigan fan.
It says a lot coming from you.
It says a lot.
Which is a good thing.
I'm really trying not to let my head get in the way, let my heart get in the way. I think Michigan State is one of those teams that I can foresee making that Final Four run. So we have Final Four, we have Sweet 16. Are you going long shots for the title? I'm really curious to what you're thinking, because this doesn't mean we think they're going to win. We just think like there's value on betting them to win, right? So national champ, what are you thinking?
My bracket's Florida against Duke, and last week we were talking about Florida at like the 750 to range, and now they're like co-favorites at plus 350. So I can't give out Florida, honestly, at the current number, even though I do think they have a great shot of winning.
Yep.
I don't know. I mean, it kind of goes against what I say, but I really do think Texas Tech, fully healthy, could be the value. I'm not sure exactly their price. I think I saw
29 to 1 on
29 to
FanDuel.
1. Okay. Yeah, I think that would be the longer shot price, where
35 to 1 on DraftKings.
yeah, so definitely
make sure you're
shop
line
around
shopping
for that. I do like the path to get to the Elite Eight, and if you have 35 to 1 in the Elite Eight, then you're in a decent position where you could, I wouldn't say hedge, but at least you have a pretty live ticket. So
For sure.
I guess it's just to get to that point is kind of what I'm banking on. So yeah, that would be my value pick down the board.
My value pick might be surprising. I haven't talked about them that much, but you can get St. John's at 34 to 1. I don't know that they'll score enough to actually get there, but what you mentioned earlier is something that I'm thinking. We've watched Houston teams for the last couple years have this elite, stingy defense. It always gives you a chance to at least get there. And once you're there, anything can happen. So at 34 to 1, St. John's, Rick Pitino would be a crazy story nationally. We're talking about the TV show vibe, right? If you get Rick Pitino back into a Final Four, if they're potentially we're saying, could you get Izzo versus Rick Pitino in the Final Four? That would be epic. So again, not saying I think St. John's is going to win the national championship, but at 34 to 1, I do like that value, and I totally agree with you on the Texas Tech thing. We've been invested in them quite a bit. If they're healthy and can stay healthy, they can pretty much beat anyone, I think, in the country on any given night. So those are two a little bit lower down the board with some value that potentially could get, to San Antonio and cut down the nets.
Right. If you get into the Final Four, that's the big thing, and I think that's why for me the West is the toughest region, because St. John's, Texas Tech. We like Florida was a team we liked last week, and now it's
all the value's gone.
I don't know. Yeah, you shouldn't be betting Florida this week. Let's just say that.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Well, we've made it through. We've got everything covered. I want to plug shamelessly that I flipped an actual coin and got results for all of my. Yeah, we're respecting the coin for sure. Some highlights from my Respect Coin bracket. The national champion is the Wofford Terriers, if you can believe that. They will beat Michigan State in the final. Some highlights, we had Auburn and Florida both lose in the first round. St. John's and Tennessee both lost in the first round. Mississippi State beat Duke to make it to the Sweet 16. Vandy beat Alabama to make it to the Sweet 16. UConn reached their third straight Final Four. Michigan State was the highest seeded team to make the Final Four. And our national champion, the Wofford Terriers. I'm going to go on record and say that you should not put any of your hard-earned money on Wofford winning the tournament. That probably goes without saying. But again, this is a fun time of year. I'm really excited for these first-round matchups. The first four is going to be pretty electric with those second games of those nights. But any final parting shots for this tournament?
Good luck. Make sure to manage your bankroll. Don't blow it all in one weekend or one round or one day or one window of games.
It's a long 22 days.
Save it for at least the next 2 weekends. If the Final Four, it's only 3 games at that point. So make sure to save the money so you have something to play with through next weekend.
For sure. And again, I think there's not really rhyme or reason for if you're making brackets. Good luck. Pick some upsets. It's never all chalk. I do think that there's going to be a decent amount of chalk after you get past this weekend. So this weekend is the one where if you're going to take all the underdogs, just bet all the underdogs. Bet $10 on them, $5, whatever is your bankroll, whatever is your means, because there will be upsets. There always is. Last question for you. How many buzzer beaters do we see in this tournament? No time on the clock, game over buzzer beaters.
Game over, so end of regulation or overtime?
I think the over-under was set last year at 1.5, and I don't think there was any.
I was gonna guess, I was gonna to be optimistic, say 2.
Okay.
2. Let's just say 2.
I will take that over 1.5 with you. I do think there's more parity this year, and I think a lot of times people say that and just say it just to say it. There's a lot of teams that are good. We don't have a clear cut. Even though Alabama or Auburn had this impressive resume, I think the strength of the SEC getting 14 teams in the tournament should tell you everything you need to know. Anyone can win on any given night. So if we do get 2 buzzer beaters, I think that'd be pretty fun. So that's it. That's what we got. First blush look at the brackets. We've got some picks. We picked some upsets. We had a little fun. Nate, thank you again for joining me.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Let's win some money. Go Texas Tech. Go UC San Diego. Go St. Mary's. As far as you want to go, we're going to be watching. Thank you for joining us on Respect Coin, and good luck. Win some bets this week.